Hello, gorgeous law school students who I know are successful and are passing every exam and your baby bar and bar exam. I'm Leslie Juvenaker, and I am a 1L student in law school, and I have the blog lawschoolforvisuallearners.com. I don't promise perfection, but I do promise fun and a fresh way of seeing the law in a different light and seeing the world through a whole new legal lens. So I'm going to walk you through just a very short concept. I'm not going to bore you or go into a very long lecture. I like to keep these videos very short so that way you can just learn one concept and then move on to the next one. So are you ready? Let's do this. I'm going to go into a share screen mode. And right now we're going to look at torts, and we're in the intentional torts. Intentional torts is pretty simple. What's great about it is that, there's only 7 of them, and we can memorize them very easily. If you want to look at the metaphor for intentional torts, if you want to create your own comic strip, if you will, and you're a visual learner like me, you can imagine them as like Snow White and the 7 torts. Like you could have a visual for every single tort. So let's just see here of what those individual torts are. So let's see, let me give you a good one. So we're walking into the intentional torts, right? And there are 7 of them, but we're going to go here. Okay, so we have battery, we have assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, trespass to land, trespass to chattels, and conversion. So those are the Snow White and the 7 torts, if you will. Let's see here. So right here, we're looking at the 7 torts: battery, assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, trespass to land, trespass to chattel, and conversion. You could also call it ABC fit if that will help you visually with a mnemonic. Eventually, if you to just stare at this slide long enough, you will eventually just be able to close your eyes and see this list in your mind, and then you'll be able to internalize every single one of these intentional torts. So that's the memorization checklist. Now, for intentional torts, we're just going to look at what is an act, right? So we're looking here in the act, intent, effect. I put it this way, it's like the green light, yellow light, red light, if you will. So the green light is really, what is the act? The act in the prima facie case is, a volitional movement done by the defendant. And the act is like the doorway for the intent to manifest the effect. So we have the act here, and that facilitates the intent to get to the effect. So if you're visually imagining this, an act is the door, right? And the intent is you walking through to the other side of the door where the effect or the cause is. So we want to look at this effect, and you're saying, okay, well, in the prima facie case, you have an act by the defendant, right? It could be moving, lifting your hand and striking it across someone's face. That's the act. The intent is to hit the person, right? To commit harm, to hurt the person. So that's the effect. A lot of people, when they're doing their analysis, are looking at, oh, well, and it becomes conclusionary because you're looking at the hypothetical, and it says, okay, well, for example, somebody is in a fight and they punch the person, and then they're like, well, because they punched the person, they committed the act, right? But that's close, but it's not the cigar. So we want to say the act is the volitional movement of lifting your hand, clenching it into a fist, throwing it in the direction of the plaintiff's face, and making contact. That's the act. The effect is the punch which causes a broken jaw, which causes the harm, the damages, which could be hospital bills, pain and suffering, maybe because they're in the hospital they can't work, some kind of pecuniary damages, lost wages, etc. So that's how we're looking at intentional torts, by analyzing the act, lifting your hand, turning your fingers into a fist, swiping it into the direction of the plaintiff, and making contact with face. The intent is to obviously punch the person's face, to cause harm, maybe even to knock them onto the ground, and then they get hurt even more. That's the intent that's being walking through the door of the act of punching the person. And so you have this here. So I'm going to take you here to what is a volitional act. So what we have here is the screen in front of you that I want you to internalize in your visual memory. You can take a good look at this. And what I want you to do is just take a quick visual swipe, okay, of it. And there's a psychological reason for why I organize this information like this, because when you're writing your essay, you always want to have it organized in a way so that way you've mastered it while studying this, practicing writing your own outline, and then applying it to your essay and your analysis. So, you know, what is a volitional act, okay? So a volitional act is the defendant's conduct manifested through a volitional act. So the key to writing your analysis is to have the rule, and every single rule has a key element in there, right? So we're looking at the act, but you have to know what that means, an act. What is a volitional act? And you have to memorize that too. It's not enough to just know the rule. You have to know the sub-element, an act, and then the definition of that in order to be able to provide a conclusive, an argument that is well analyzed. So we sit here and we say, okay, well, we have this defendant's conduct manifested through a volitional act. Now look at this little visual right here. Nowhere in here is it a car hitting another car, or, you're seeing things like a person punching a face, because it's really about looking at the actor, the defendant, and the parts of their body and how they move it. So that's the reason why I put this here, to jog your memory to go, it's the act of putting the body in motion. So for here, we look in the example and it says the act complained of by the plaintiff would not be the driving of the automobile. A lot of people in their hypos, they go, you're driving along the road and you hit your car into somebody and that was the act. That's not the act. That's like the force in motion that you sit in. The act is you're driving along the road, you see another car coming, and you consciously take your wheel and you turn your arms and the wheel in the direction of the plaintiff, and that sets your car into motion to hit the plaintiff's car. So we're looking at the actual physical act. So we're seeing here the movement by the arms and the legs sets the car into motion. So it is a very nuanced definition of what is a volitional act, right? It's physically moving the wheel to turn the car, and the car is the energy that hits the plaintiff. So, but what is not a volitional act? In order to know what a volitional act is, you got to know what it's not. So a volitional act in this circumstance is unconscious acts, like a diabetic is having a seizure on the highway. They cannot control their body. There's no conscious control when a diabetic is having a seizure, an epileptic seizure, and they just lose control. We've all seen videos on YouTube or Instagram where there was one of a gentleman driving a Cadillac, and he kept running into, on the highway, these light posts and knocking them down on the Cadillac, like the Cadillac was a tank and a car is driving next to it, and they open the door thinking the guy's crazy, but in fact he was having a diabetic seizure and he was just not even there. So if your consciousness is not there, diabetic seizure, an epileptic seizure, any kind of stroke, or any kind of physical thing that takes your mental, physical capacities away from being able to direct your body, that is not a volitional act. So when we're looking at tort essays and hypotheticals, we're looking at, what is the difference between a volitional and a non-volitional act. So a reflex action, now this one's a tricky one, because let's say you are Bruce Lee and you are reflexively very quick, and somebody's throwing a spear at Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee lifts his arm. Well, he's got that consciousness to anticipate and to recognize that someone's trying to hit him, right? So he lifts his arm quickly. Now, let's say you have that's a lot of people call that a reflex action, but he's got the consciousness of mind to know what's happening while he's moving. But if you have a reflex action and you don't understand what's happening, let's say, somebody throws a ball at you, but you don't see it, and you just step out of the way, and your act of steps on somebody's foot so hard that it breaks their foot. You're not really doing that. You don't have a lot of consciousness at that moment to understand what the situation is doing or happening, or to grasp the intent. So it's not really enough of an intention to say that. So then the last one is this image here I want you to see is of Dwight Schrute touching Jim Halpert's crotch at work. Okay, that is definitely a battery, but he doesn't have the intent to touch his crotch. He may have tripped or fallen or something, and as a result he accidentally grabs Jim's crotch. So if you're tripping and falling because you're in a subway and you're walking up the subway and you miss a step, and because of that you accidentally grab somebody's butt, that's a reflex action. And the final one is legally incompetent. This is not about mentally insane or crazy, which you can be held liable. We're talking about those who are just legally, and I put the image of Rain Man because it's a very clear image in your mind going, he has no legal capacity, he's a ward of the state, or in that situation becomes a ward of his brother. And, whoever is responsible for him in some ways, if their behavior isn't, if his behavior isn't intentional, they may be held negligent because they're responsible for him. But in this specific case, if Rain Man here were to hurt somebody, he's not legally competent to understand, his actions and the consequences of his actions. He may not be held liable. So that is the one specific lesson for today that is really important to look at. So if you see my slide and you go, oh yeah, that's a good explanation, or you see my slide, you go, maybe that wasn't the best clear, make your own. I use 5 different books to gather my understandings and even more of, what is a volitional act? And this is just a really one word in the definition of an intentional tort. What the prima facie case of an intentional tort. We're just talking about the act. What is an act? And you have to know that in order to make a really good explanation. So make your own slide. You can hand draw them. I've hand drawn them, and I'll share some copies on the blog just to give you that. But for me, I move way faster. You can see here in my tort slides, I've got 161 slides. I move way faster to produce them on the computer than to hand draw them, although it is really fun to hand draw them if you are interested in comic book creation and drawing and whatnot. Let's stop share. So that's my quick lesson for what is an act, what's a volitional act, and what is it not. So that way when you make your analysis for an intentional tort and you see the fact patterns, the images in the mind that you're painting with the words, you're able to recognize right away with this slide or with one that you create, what is one, what is not. And again, remember, it really is as simple as the act of lifting your arm, clenching your fist, swinging it with full force in the direction of the plaintiff's face and making contact. That's the act. And that's really when you're in a jury situation, you're looking at them and you're explaining to them what is an intentional act. and you're helping them to really do a play-by-play. It's like a football video replay. They're showing you like step by step how did the player move their body. So hopefully this is a very simple instruction for you. I'm going to do these more often just because they really help me. And if you are a professor or somebody who knows better and you say, no, not quite, hey, make your own video or leave a really good detailed comment and help us get it right, I invite you to. And if you have any more visual ideas, submit them to the blog and I'll share them. If you have an illustration or a really good picture or a video, I encourage you to submit to the Law School for Visual Learners blog. You can email me directly, learnlawwithleslie@gmail.com, and you can send to me anything that you think will be helpful for other law students who are learning the law, learning specific concepts, and you want to help us visually. I invite you to do that. I'll put it directly, whether it's on the resources page or if it's on the blog. I'm happy to do that. I hope this lesson was very helpful for you. This is helpful for me. I'm going to keep doing them as much as I can, given the time that I have owning a business, doing law school, and having 2 little kids who I am sure in the process of making these videos, you will hear them. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Have a fabulous day, you gorgeous law students, and I can't wait to hear all your wonderful feedback. Have a wonderful day.